Expressionism in the Eyes of Kandinsky by Kimberly Gould. In this presentation, we will be discussing the artistic movement known as Expressionism, as well as go in depth later on one of the pioneers to this, Vasily Kandinsky. Expressionism, what is it? So, it's an artistic movement that occurred in the late 19th century, early 20th century, predominantly in Germany. It was in reference to having deliberate distortion and exaggeration of forms as a way to create an expressive nature of art. Impressionists, they sought to express nature and the human form through paint, whereas Expressionists sought to express their feelings about what they saw and what they felt. How do we know if something's expressionist? Shapes and forms are going to lack detail. It's going to have constant change of textures or colors, maybe have some extreme contrast or dynamics. But the key point into separating expressionist art is the non-representational factor of it. So I included two paintings below. We have Pablo Picasso's Three Musicians on the left and Vasily Kandinsky's Composition Number 5 on the right. The very first difference that you can see is subject matter. With Picasso's painting, it's titled Three Musicians. You can see the three musicians, you can see their instruments and their sheet music, and you know they exist. They are the primary focus of that painting. Whereas with Kandinsky's painting on the right, there is no subject matter. Nothing about the title describes what you're looking at, and you can't tell what is form, right? Your first immediate reaction is going to be the colors. What about the lighter colors and the darker colors, and how do they mesh and they combine, and the lines, do they have any distinct meaning to them, and what color are those and why, right? So a lot of the questions that you're going to face with expressionist art is why, and almost like what does it mean? Whereas with Three Musicians by Pablo Picasso, you can tell that it's the three musicians. You're just now looking at the artist's style. So Picasso's painting on the left is part of another movement called Cubic movement or Cubist movement. As you can tell with the geometric and quadrilateral shapes of all of the musicians. History of Expressionism. It first emerged in 1905. It is a combination of two groups. So the Bridge, which was a group composed of or started by four German students guided by Ernest Ludwig Kirchner. He is the first man on the left. And in 1911, Kandinsky teamed up with Franz Marc and a bunch of other popular artists at the time to create the Blue Rider. Expressionism was occurring during World War I, but it became a more dominant style of art after World War I. A lot of artists during the time were trying to create expressive post-war paintings. They were expressing how they felt, maybe anger, sadness, or relief from post-war, for their post-war society. Vasily Kandinsky, he became an artist in 1896. He was originally shaped greatly by French Impressionism, more specifically Claude Monet. There's a painting at the top right corner titled The Monet Family in the Garden. This is one of the pieces that he was heavily influenced by. And it's not so much due to the representational factor of it, but due to the brilliant colors, the way the brushstrokes form and create this image. And it helped influence him to create Blue Rider in 1903, which is the middle piece. As you can tell, it's still very different from his art later on. It has representation. You can see the person on the horse, and you can see the distinct environmental background. So you can tell that he was influenced by Impressionism, but he later realized that, or he later felt that representationalism was only hurting his art, right? He thought that color and light techniques were more outspoken, and they talked more about a painting rather than the representational nature of it. And that's what he noticed about the Monet family picture, is that he really enjoyed the colors, the distinct contrast and distinct emphasis on colors, and that's what later helped him create Untitled, which is his first abstract watercolor in 1910. He felt that colors spoke to a person's spirit and expressed the feelings of their soul. So he hoped to marry the two, spiritual language and colors together to create art. He felt that blue would represent calm and peace and serenity, and so he used colors to evoke these types of emotions. artwork. So this is improvisation number 27, Garden of Love 2 by Kandinsky. This is another piece that is just non-representational. Nothing about the title speaks to what we are looking at. We're not looking at a garden. We don't see the traditional forms of floral and plant life outdoors. We're looking at a window almost to his soul or his spirit about how he was feeling when he created this. He felt that the colors and the forms represented what he felt rather than having to represent a garden itself. So he used predominantly yellow colors to evoke a feeling of disturbance, whereas he had the splashes of blues and greens in the top left corner to give off again that peace and serenity. You can also see the distinct brush strokes in this paintings. More specifically in the bottom left corner, you can see where he stops and starts with new colors. And this painting just lacks a representation. If you had to choose a focal point or a point that your eyes are most drawn to, it would probably be the center, maybe because that circular image or circular shape is the closest you're getting to a traditional or geometric shape in his paintings. His influence later on, so he, like I mentioned, he's trying to marry that musical aspect of many of his artworks titles as well as the spiritual aspect of the colors together. He also became an art teacher at the Bauhaus School of Architecture and Applied Art and taught a course in color. So his primary focus was trying to get people to understand that color was not something that should be in the back seat, right? It could be used to be the primary focus of your painting itself rather than subjectivity. This would later influence neo-expressionism, which came years and years later to after expressionism movement, and it influenced artists like Vasily Rebenchenko, as you can see in the painting to the right titled Red Room Number 1. This painting is so distinct because of its color, right? It has this bright red color that is almost taking up the representational figures. It's almost taking over them and making you focus on the color rather than the figures themselves. And that is an influence of expressionist art and Kandinsky himself on focusing on colors rather than representation of subjectivity. And he has influenced many artists, and he will continue to do so many years to come, as his artwork and the artwork of all expressionists is very influential. Thank you for listening to my slideshow, and these are my references.